map location. So I had to, sorry, I was a couple minutes late. I was sitting there trying to figure it out, and then I just copied it and then pasted it in my browser, and it did work that way, just not as a direct link.
Interesting. What about the email? Did the email work
Well, I
okay?
think the reason it was is if for whatever reason it in the invite it showed up in where normally there'd be an address. But usually that's not a problem. Like if a Zoom, for
Yeah,
instance,
I
there,
see because it showed up under location.
it showed up in the location, and
Okay.
when I
I'll
clicked on
try to
that
paste it.
link, yeah, it was treating it like it was a an address. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. Then
No worries.
fingers.
I just want to let you know that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So did you get my email? I
I did. I did. We should be okay
okay. I did. I thought
because
we would be, but I just wanted to
yeah,
make
because
sure.
we're gonna do. We'll stop at the 10:20 mark or even a little bit earlier. But what I would love to do here, Eric, is first of all introduce you to our second podcast that we have started with ClickVault. So welcome. I'm super excited here.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
on.
I am definitely someone who is the very good at being on the fly. So I am doing some of this on the fly because I was having some issues this morning, but
Well,
I
me
got it
too. I have no prep for this other than life experience.
amazing. So that's all I want because if I don't want you to prep for what your life has brought you. So quick introduction to me. I'm John V. I'm the founder and CEO of ClickVault. Been in the industry for 19 plus years, focused on fintechs, consulting, and the financial services space. ClickVault got born or built or whatever the word is called or discovered when I realized there's so many companies out there that are ready to really build their brands, build their ROIs, but don't know how to. And where I want to come in is where the click comes in is finding all the different small and medium sized companies and showing them all the steps necessary for them to, build and just enhance scale their businesses, right? And the vault comes from security, trust, and visibility because, being in the banking industry, I'm always been regulated. And so trust is extremely important. So when I started this company, I realized, I really want to start meeting fellow peers in the industry who are doing things like this in different ways and how they became founder CEOs and, what their stories are because once you become the founder and CEO, you realize, actually, I know nothing. And then realize I need to have friends in the industry that I can start having conversations with. So here we go.
Yeah,
Let's do
isn't
this.
that
So, Eric,
something when you
well,
realize how little you know sometimes? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I realize I am not a tech guru at all. I'm good at, I'm so excited that I was able to figure out this the mic issue here on the fly. I'm really proud of myself. But would love for you to introduce yourself, and then we have a couple of topics that we'd love to focus on.
Okay, terrific. Eric Togneri. I'm out of Atlanta, Georgia. For the last 2 decades, I've been running an investment bank that's focused on the lower middle market, and we help our clients determine, build, and realize the value they've created in their businesses. And a new endeavor, relatively new, not the service that we offer, but what we're doing with it is our business valuation offering. We have branded it as part of our Exit on Top umbrella, which is what we promise to our promise to clients is that we are going to provide them a path to determine, build, and realize so they can exit on top. And so that valuation service offering is rolling out nationally as we speak. We're already one of the most prolific in the Southeast United States. And so we look forward to bringing it to a town near you. And that's what we're up to.
That's amazing. I wish more companies know about you because I think I read something just recently where, sports athletes say, you don't decide what you're going to do after you retire. You decide it before you retire so that when you're retired, you're not saying, I'm retired. You actually know what's next. And so that's
Yeah.
awesome. I wish more people thought like you. So before we go too in the weeds, I'd love to know like the history of like how did this company get started? Where did the family business start? And, what's
Yeah.
your
Yeah. So I grew up in a family where my dad was an entrepreneur and had a great deal of success early in his career. He sold his first company in his early 30s to a New York Stock Exchange company, and that was a $180 million deal for him. So he hit it pretty big pretty early in his life. And then he just spent the rest of his career doing very entrepreneurial things. So I kind of grew up around it. And and kind of knew that was going to be my path eventually. But I was given some advice in my undergrad, and I went to the University of Iowa and had a really great mentor there, and super successful entrepreneur in his own right. And he basically said, "Hey, Eric, take advantage of some of these big corporations that are looking to recruit you. Get a little seasoning, but don't stay more than 2 years. Save your money, learn a little bit about the real world, and then start your first company." Well, unfortunately for me, I started to heed his advice, but a year and a half into my 2-year plan, I was offered an opportunity and took it, which was a promotion with the company I was with, which was L'Oreal, a global beauty company. And that just set on a cascade of events that evolved into 12 promotions over the next 15 years. And I found myself in corporate America with a whole lot of responsibility relative to my age and extremely unhappy as somebody that really knew that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. And in big pharma, that's not the most entrepreneurial environment. There's a lot of great things about it, but entrepreneurship is not one of them. Their innovation is in the lab, not in the field. So I started seeking to buy a company, and I was in northern New Jersey at the time, and was actively on that search when my dad, in a sort of different world, on a parallel path that there was confluence that happened, owned a company in Atlanta, Georgia, where we're currently located. It was down here as CEO and chairman of that company, and was approached by a German company that wanted to do. Basically, they were the number one company in Germany doing oil recycling, and it was an oil recycling business he had here. And they wanted a platform in the US, and they gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. So here I was approaching my mid 30s, and he was in his mid 60s, and he wasn't ready to retire, and I was ready to do something entrepreneurial. And we decided to put our forces together, and Neri Capital was formed. And so that was the beginning of it. And when I say an investment bank, when we first started off, we were really transaction focused on helping people acquire and sell their businesses. And that was our sole focus really for that first, this was 2005 to 2008 when the recession hit. That was our sole focus. But when 2008 happened, for those of you that are listening that don't understand what that recession meant, it meant that all the successful companies out there hunkered down, and basically transaction activity stopped other than liquidation and bankruptcies for the better part of 3 years. It was a very extended, basically cooling off period, or whatever you want to call it, for what was a very hot market for the decade prior. Banks quit lending, real estate quit being utilized as collateral, valuations were terrible. And so it challenged us to become more relevant outside of the transaction space to our business owner clients. And that's how we came up eventually with Determine, Build, Realize. I became one of the first exit planners in the country. I was one of the first 100 certified exit planning advisors through the Exit Planning Institute. Now they're tens of thousands. And, it wasn't because of foresight. Trust me, it was because that recession hit and I was grappling for some answer to how I could offer utility to business owners. But what it did was it set us on the course to where we are today as a full service M&A firm. We love meeting clients years, sometimes decades before they're ready to exit their businesses. And we offer a plethora of services, both directly and through our partners, that allow them to understand where their value is, why it is what it is, what they can do about it, and go along the path of not just running a business that's profitable, but running a business with intent to create value.
Right.
That's kind of the basis of our firm.
So,
And that's Neri Capital Partners. So there's not, I know it gets a little muddy, but Neri Capital Partners is the brand that we've had for our investment bank for the last several decades. Exit on Top is our direct to business owner effort to focus specifically on valuation and on value building. And that's what we're rolling out nationally.
So when it comes to you mentioned it, and I think we should just hold on this. Is it better for someone to even think about, I want to be able to exit a company but I want to create a company. I don't know where to start. Have people kind of come to you this way being, I want to make money. I want to be on top. Do you have suggestions for me on how I can choose the right companies to invest in? Like you mentioned, it was the recession that you were able to make advantage of it. How do people find out what type of businesses to look at so they'll be successful?
Yeah, so acquiring businesses is really at the level that we're talking about, which is basically, and I'm putting the serial entrepreneurs aside that are just in it for, hey, I'll invest in anything that'll make me money and I'll flip it, right? I'll own it 3 to 5 years and move on. But for the normal aspiring entrepreneur that's looking to find a business to buy, you really need to start with what do you like to do, right? And where's your passion lie? And is your passion going to be aligned with whatever endeavor you're going to embark upon? That's so critically important because entrepreneurship is hard, and you've got to love it. If you don't love it, it's going to be a miserable existence for you. And if you're going to have that, you might as well work for somebody else, and not
Yeah.
take all the risk and have all the heartache and all the rest that goes along with it. But there's all the rewards that go along with, if you're really an entrepreneur, you want to be the one that the weight lies on. You want to be the one that makes the decisions. But I would say to start off with it, just start thinking about what your passion is. And then it's not always so obvious what exact type of business that you want. In other words, my passion might be, oddly enough, I'm going to a meeting with a CPA bookkeeping firm right after this, and these people love detail, and it drives them. You know what keeps them up at night? When things don't balance. Okay,
I was
that's
just
not me.
gonna say the
That's not
final,
me.
yeah,
But
0.0,
attention to detail is really what it gets down to, in order,
right,
And so I look at it and say, well, your passion and the way you're wired is around that. So it manifests for you in that successful firm in a CPA bookkeeping world, but it could easily manifest itself in all kinds of engineering type of roles and just roles that take that level of specificity. Right.
right.
And so I think about when folks come to me, I just say, hey, start with your passion, start with really drives you at the core. What is your why? And then let's try to figure out a business that's going to align with that. And then there's just sort of natural things that happen. There are dying industries, especially right now. A lot of industries are not dying, but they're almost all being redefined by this wave of new technology, right? And so AI is changing everything. It's eliminating some things, but really what it's doing is it's just creating a different level of opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's just taking away the mundane activities and helping you think faster, right? I think
Well,
if
you know what it means to me? I mean, I honestly think I'm looking to hire people because of it,
yeah,
right? I'm not looking to scale back at all. Matter of fact, I'm scaling up as a result of it. That's just the way I'm approaching it. I'm approaching it as a huge opportunity, and I think it's a productivity play, right? We can get so much more.
yeah,
Just
exactly.
think back in the days when there was just pen and paper, right? And then typewriters came, and then computers came, and then so on. All these waves of technology, they don't decrease the demand for folks. It just redefines what folks do.
Yeah. So what's the most common mistake you've seen business owners make when they're preparing for their exit?
Most of the problems are made by their lack of preparation. I'm always astounded that I can go to any business owner and basically say, what is your business worth? And they'll be like, honestly, no idea. I've never had a valuation. I've got my ideas of what I think it's worth. And I'll be like, well, what are those based on? And typically it's on some sort of hearsay. My friend sold a business and it was about the same size as mine. So that's what mine's probably worth. False assumptions, right? Because every business, it's not apples to apples, especially they're not apples to apples, even if they're in the same industry, let alone if the friend's business in this instance was the same size. It was most likely a very different business than theirs. And oh, by the way, whatever your friend told you that they sold it for, just divide that by half. It's like fishing. The fish you caught is always a lot bigger than the one you actually caught. So I mean, there's no substitute for valuation, but valuation's a number, right? And it's a nice to know. You can get a valuation and stick it in a drawer, but
Hmm.
the thing that successful entrepreneurs, successful value builders do is they demand of whoever's doing their valuation that they explain why their valuation is the way it is, what's dragging it down, what's building it up, what's on par with the market, and then they put forth a plan on what they can do about it to make it more valuable. Okay. And that's really what an actionable evaluation is all about. That's what we deliver at our company. I demand it of myself and my company. I demand it of all my clients, in terms of at least the deliverable that we give to them. I can lead them to water, right? And so the biggest mistake that folks make, first of all, is having no idea where they are, nor how to create value. They're all about the
What do you
money
think the
they,
reason for that is? I mean, if they're doing so well, hypothetically,
yeah.
why wouldn't they be kind of looking at these numbers
Well,
to,
that's just it. They're doing, the ones that are doing well, even the ones that aren't, but the ones that are doing well, why do I care? Or like type of thing. But it's so funny. Here's really where I was kind of going to go long term with this discussion and the biggest mistake they make. Everybody knows, right? Whether they do it or not, it's a different story. But pretty much 100% of folks know you don't start planning your retirement when you're ready to retire. You start saving in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, right? In anticipation that somewhere in my 60s or so, I'm going to probably, or 70s for some folks, are going to be, moving into a retirement phase. Okay, but you start planning it decades in advance. The exact opposite happens with business owners. Very few plan their exits. It's a shame.
do you
And
think
they
they're not doing the exit because they think they're just going to have it forever? Like, why do people decide to do an exit?
It's well, part of it is because the education has not been out there. I give very much kudos to the media and to the financial planning sector, if you will, wealth management, that they have programmed people to understand this dynamic. But here's the rub. For entrepreneurs, typically, according to the SBA, on average, the small business owner, and that's typically defined as businesses with revenues of under 25 million, 85% of their net worth is tied up in the value of their business. So it is their retirement. And so, but they don't make that connection. They keep going on. They keep their heads down. If they're a painter, they keep painting. If they're an engineering company, they keep building, right? They just keep doing what they're doing and not, and as long as the revenues are coming in and the profits coming in, they feel as though they're content. But if you're all about the money you make, you don't have a business really. You have a job, and your job is creating income. Now, it's not that the money you make is not important, and it's what I always tell entrepreneurs. You'll see it on the headline of my socials, for instance. It's not the money you make, it's the value that you create, because that's where it's going to be. That's where 80% of your net worth is. Can you imagine a CEO of a corporation and you asked him what his stock price was and he said, I have no, that's just his valuation. That's all that is. I have no idea what it is, and I don't have any plan to make it more valuable. I'm just going to keep on going, and as long as my P&L looks okay and I can pay my bills, I'm happy. You'd fire that CEO. People need to think about their companies like a business, not like a job. And unfortunately, way too many entrepreneurs still think of it as a job. And so I'm on a mission to get folks thinking about exit planning way longer than I'm 55 years old. I better start thinking about this stuff.
Yeah. So, tagging on that one, are there certain types of industries that are higher risk? So you mentioned, the painters, and if they don't have an exit plan and suddenly they fall off the ladder, which I've seen actually happen to people, then they literally stop their whole
In
business.
painting, literally. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you even look for these type of companies to say, hey, have you thought about an exit plan? Do you have some sort of, backup if something happens to this today?
I typically don't approach it with my gosh, your business is going away. I always just approach it as, hey, let's figure out what you have. And then the risk, so the SWOT analysis and risk inherent in that SWOT analysis will point out, okay, here's your threat. AI is going to markedly change this facet of your business, for instance, since I brought up AI earlier. What's your plan right now? What's your AI readiness is what we call it. And we were coming up right now with a way of scoring that, but an AI readiness score for companies, for our clients to integrate into what we do right now, just like we did, a decade ago, where we added to, the risk mitigation process, cybersecurity, when that became a big threat out there. Now there's a whole industry there to help you out with that. But AI is the same way, and I don't want to harp on AI other than to say that, to your point, if there are threats out there, and AI could be a threat, but it also could be a huge opportunity. It's just how you approach it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what's kind of also important to understand is what is your focus as a company? Where do you want to go? Why do you want to grow it? And so, from a valuation perspective, Eric, how have buyer behavior and valuation multipliers shifted in 2026 compared to, say, even 10 years
Yeah, so it's a real bullish market right now. It has been really ever since the national elections happened in, a couple of years ago, or coming up on a couple of years ago. The floodgates open. What we had was a period, you had COVID, and then you had, depending on the state that you were in, you had either a pretty quick build back. Fortunately for us down here in the Southeast, we opened back up. And so COVID impact on business was about a 6 month event. For folks on the West Coast and Northeast, for instance, it was a 2 year process to open back up. But coming out of that, there was still kind of some trepidation on what's this. How do we get things back to the way they were before? So there's a lot of focus on just getting back to normal. And then by the time that started to happen, then a national election happened, and that's a year and a half process, right? And there were all kinds of things being floated out. So, for instance, if you rewind to early 2024, the national media was saying that if one political party were to take control, they were floating capital gains increases up to 40 something percent from 20 something percent. Okay, a panic sets in, right? And then all of a sudden, other folks start coming out and saying, well, no, that'll never happen, because of X, Y, and Z. And so then there was uncertainty. And then all of a sudden, so the floodgates opened up, I don't think as much. And part of it was because, yeah, we've got a small business friendly administration in place right now. It might have been part of it because of that, but I think it was the reduction in the uncertainty of what folks had to deal with.
Right.
Right. And so once the national election happened, ever since then, so for the last year and a half, small business sales and valuations have been booming. Transaction flow has increased dramatically. We're seeing about a leveling off in the middle market of, so by that I mean middle market deals are not suffering, but they're not exploding. Small business deals, lower middle market deals, businesses, from say 2 to 50 million, type of deals are, I mean, just exploding, and the valuations right along with it. So this is a really a golden era for business sales. We've been double digit sales increase ever since we jumped out of the recession. So we're a little bit of a unicorn in that we haven't had bad years at all for a long time. But the industry as a whole is also experiencing wonderful growth in this past year and a half. And so we, as a kind of leading firm in sort of the growth mode, especially with our national valuation brand rolling, we're just growing right along with it. It's been amazing. Yeah.
I was just thinking, when you decide to help a company, exit, you also help them either get acquired. Maybe they're exiting because, they're at the peak of their life and they're like, I want to do something else. And can you help me get acquired by a larger company? Or, where does that focus come?
Yeah. So again, it comes down to the individual and what they want to do, right? So there's no real general rule, but as if folks are doing appropriate exit planning, they get their business exit ready so that no matter what happens, the business can change hands.
Right.
So it's almost like life insurance in the respect that, if the unthinkable happened, your business would still have value,
Right.
right? You've managed yourself, if not off the org chart, into a head of a team-led company. In other words, you could disappear and go on vacation for a couple of months, or say, "Hey, I'm just going to be an investor in this company. The company can run without me." And if you've built a company the right way, that's the way the company will be. That doesn't mean that the owner can't stay in the company and stay involved, but then they go into what we call a visionary leader role.
Right.
Which is they're not running daily operations. They're not running the machine. They're thinking about what's next. It was when I was in the consumer products world, like with L'Oreal and with Pfizer and with these other companies that I worked for, we were always at the senior level of management, we were always 2 to 3 years ahead. We were doing strategic planning. We had already put together our internal plans. Now we had people out in the field executing our plans, but those plans were formulated years before,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And yeah, there were pivots that would pop up every now and then where we'd have to change something on the fly of that plan. But in general, we were thinking about, I know what my counterparts are doing today. My counterparts for back then, if they're still in that business, this time of year, going into the summer, we just finished up basically 2028 planning.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's how corporate America, that is the good part about it. They've got the luxury and levels of management. Well, that's the way entrepreneurs should be as well, or aspire to be, right? Get yourself out of the daily grind. It doesn't mean that you're not on top of it in terms of reporting and understanding it, but you've got a team-led company. In other words, you've entrusted and empowered people to make decisions, but with that empowerment comes accountability as well. But you've created a company that's exitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, in my company, I am actively managing myself off the org chart. I've got myself out of deal making on the day-to-day basis, which used to be my life for the better part of the last 2 decades. I am really all about, at this point, overseeing the rollout of a national valuation brand and an exit strategy. And I plan, whether I sell the company or not, is immaterial. I'll
Right.
make that decision when I get there. But I'm 56 years old. I've got a 4-year window that my self-imposed deadline that, in 2030, I'm going to be off the org chart completely and out of this company.
I love
Now, can I change my mind in 2030? Of course I can. But that's
it.
the plan. That's what I'm driving towards. Yeah.
But just having that strategy and focus, I think, is so important for every company, leadership and founder, CEO, because I think most people are always thinking about just looking at the tactical part of the day to day because they just want to make sure the ROI is up, there's nothing in the red, and they're making sure. So, kind of
That's
changing
a
that up.
job. You just described a job, didn't you?
I know. And that's what I'm saying. When you're moving out of being a employee to being a, entrepreneur, you need to think differently, right? So would love to know, I want to have a couple different topics, but let's do for a second, the community and mission. I know you're in the Atlanta area. How do you get noticed? How do people find you? And how do you do seminars in the city? And, how do people, find ways to work with you?
Yeah, so I can tell you what I've done traditionally. Now my team is doing is actively participating in networking organizations. So there are some that in my field they're advisor related. In other words, colleagues, peer type networking organizations. I'm in a leadership role. I founded a chapter of what's called the Exit Planning Exchange here in Atlanta, and being active in that community. Being participating in masterminds and doing speaking engagements and the rest, local chambers of commerce. I've got some of my people in networking groups like Provisors and BNI International. Yeah, so just being plugged in. Now, one of the things that I do all the time right now, and this is why I welcome the invitation to you, is, I'm out there advocating and spreading the word about Neri Capital Partners and Exit on Top. And so
Mhm.
whether that's a podcast or I every couple of weeks I hold a webinar that we'll promote on Exit on Top. The next one's on the 23rd, by the way. And so exitontop.com, people go there and register for that. And so I'm regularly doing that. And yeah, so that's really, my kind of role right now is kind of chief, for lack of a better term. Yeah, chief strategist, but chief advocate.
I think there's always a chief advocate, always needed throughout the whole process. I feel like when you don't have someone that's the advocate, people don't have direction and people lose the excitement and the drive. And I feel the advocate is the one that will bring the business forward. So let's talk about some war stories. Don't have to go into the gruesome ones, but what's been something that you had a beautiful, green deal or some red flags or, some,
Yeah. Well, there's so many great deals. I mean, I would love to have maybe a separate conversation with you about why this is the way it is, but we have mostly green deals because of the way we go to market with companies. We don't take companies to market if they're ready to exit. We don't take them until they're exit ready, or we just don't take them at all. So we close roughly 96.5% is the number right now. We keep track of this, of course. 96.5% of the businesses we take to market sell successfully. Well, that's a remarkable number when you know the
Yeah.
industry average is well less than 20%
Right.
of companies that go to market sell. And that's because the companies aren't ready and the representation isn't there and there's all kinds of reasons. But so we get a lot of great deals. So one war story I just love to talk about, because I can talk about it very publicly. He's given me the green light. He's on my website. Is a gentleman named Brian Selleck. And Brian was, when I first approached me, was in his early 40s. He had started a concrete company. Basically, when he was 20 years old, he was a finance major in college, really smart guy, but really hated finance. He was good at it,
Yeah.
but didn't enjoy it. And he was sitting there, why am I getting this degree in finance? He knew he could do it well, and he knew he could make a good living doing it. That's why he was doing it. And he was 20, finding himself. But he happened to be a part of a church congregation. And one day, one of the parishioners said, "Hey, I want to lay a slab of concrete in my backyard," and wanted some help. And Brian volunteered to help, and so did a bunch of other guys. And Brian was like, "Man, I could do this," And a career was born. And so, with a truck and a few tools, he started a concrete company and became the most dominant concrete company in South
Good for him.
Atlanta. Yeah, and but found himself in his mid 40s when I entered into the picture. Basically burnout. He had been burning the candle at both ends for 2 decades. He had built this really successful company. He's making a great living. But all the weight was on him, and he had not created an exit-ready company yet. But there were many aspects of it that were. And so, anyway, I did a valuation on his company, and he's started thinking. When I first met him, he's like, "Let's get a valuation." I'm thinking about kind of like my little plan, right? He's like, "I'm thinking about retiring when I'm 50." Well, that was about 6 years out from when we were having this conversation. And then he saw the valuation and he's like, "Man, somebody's willing to pay that for this?" And I'm like, "Man, that's what you've created." And he said, "Well, if it's that much, then let's start talking about my exit plan." And anyway, so we successfully exited his business. And he was already invested in commercial real estate. I think he owned about 20 properties at the time. I think he owns over 100 now with the proceeds he bought from his business. So he's heavily invested in commercial real estate. And almost like clockwork, after 2 years of relaxing, I guess you would call it, investing in commercial real estate, he came
Right.
back and said, "Eric, I'm ready to get back into the game. Find me a company to buy." And we found him one, and he bought one within 2 years. So these cycles, the entrepreneurship didn't go away. He just needed a break. But I mean, that was like one of those things where you see somebody that, did well for themselves, worked hard, knew their limitations, knew when their body was telling them it was time to step back. He could have stepped back and created more of a team-led company. He decided to step back by exiting, but it turned out to be a real success for him. Financially, it was lucrative because he was able to exit a business that was doing very well, and somebody paid $1 million premium, by the way, on the valuation for the business. And so, we have stories like that, though, all over the place. That just happens to be Boss Concrete here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think, hearing the war stories, the green war stories, it just gives people hope that, like, you know what, like, don't give up and don't underestimate what you can do. I think that's so nice. Want to be mindful of our time here also, Eric.
Thank you.
What's a call to action for owners, and what are some next steps for Eric? I know you mentioned you want to move on that sailboat and move on in the next 4 years.
Well, no sail. Well, maybe I'll buy a sailboat. I don't know, but that's probably not my exit. But that's what exit on top is, though, right? My exit on top has a different definition than yours.
Yeah.
And so I go around and I'm always mic'd up when I'm out in the field, whether I'm at a trade event or wherever I am. And I've got my DJ little mic, lavalier, and all the rest. And I'm ready to record people on the fly. Tell
I
me
love
what
it.
exit on top means to you. And I get a different answer every time.
Is it by age groups that the answers are different, or do you think
Well,
it's
Brett,
what their
you know
industry?
what? Here's the common thread. They're always someone's definition of freedom. And so naturally, my older clients tend to have something like, "I can't wait to just hang out with the grandkids,"
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of that with the older folks. But, I get everything from Yeah, the sailboat thing. And matter of fact, I sold a HVAC company for one of my clients, and the first thing he did was buy a 55-foot yacht, and
Good for
he
him.
parks it in the Virgin Islands now, and he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off of a yacht that he gets to sail around for a couple of months every summer for himself. you know so it's a business and it's personal, but I get, my gosh, I'm going to finally spend time at that lake home, or I'm going to buy a place at the beach,
Yeah,
or you know what, I'm going to, the serial entrepreneurs that are out there, their exit on top is, I'm going to sell this company, I'm going to reinvest and buy the next one in the next one, right? So exit on top is a really, kind of personal thing. Hopefully that answers kind of the question
it
on
does.
folks in general, because it is very specific. My exit on top is, if everything goes as planned, I will be out of this company, whether I sell it or not. Again, is to me is immaterial. Other than my vision is that I'll still have a relationship with the company, whether it's through ownership or through a strategic alliance, that this company is going to be the source for me for the investment portfolio that I'm going to build. So I'm going to go into, for the balance of my career, the intention is from 60 until I'm no longer able to work, is to be a small business investor and to just be buying companies and
So
build a
like on
portfolio
Shark
of
Tank
companies.
and be one of those investors.
Yeah, kind of like that, but we'll be doing nationally rolled out. We'll be doing over 1,000 valuations a year. That's 1,000 companies that I get to value firsthand, and then of those companies, I can decide which ones I want to make a run at purchasing. Yeah,
That is absolutely amazing.
yeah.
So being mindful of our time together, Eric, I have this thing, it's called ClickVault, raw and unfiltered.
Okay,
And it's 10 questions. I would love for maybe no more than 2 words. You can
I'll
say
try.
longer if you like,
That's a
but
challenge for me. People can
that's,
tell.
that's the fun of this. So let's get started. Biggest lie sellers tell themselves about what their business is worth. You can say more than a word.
I, yeah, yeah. I was trying to think of something extremely pithy. The lie is that if you want to do it right, you got to do it yourself. That's the lie.
You've done 1,000 valuation. What's the one biggest thing almost every owner waits too long to do?
Valuation.
Okay. If you could only look at one number to judge a business's health, what is it?
LTV, lifetime value of clients, customers.
Okay. Seller's market or buyer's market right now in 2026?
Sellers.
What's a red flag that makes you think a real deal is going to fall apart?
Emotion.
Best exit you've ever been part of. What made it so clean?
Baker Glass and Glazing Company. Owner ran a tip-top ship and had realistic expectations.
What does exiting on top actually mean to you personally?
My version of freedom, which is to say, I get to invest in others and build entrepreneurs up.
Father-son business with your dad. Hardest part.
Separating business from the dinner table.
You left a 25-year corporate to do this. Any regrets?
None. Should have done it sooner.
Last piece of advice for a business owner who thinks they're 2 years away from selling.
First and foremost, get your books cleaned up. Second, if you don't have a valuation, get it and start addressing the low-hanging fruit. That'll immediately improve the value.
Well, Eric, before we close out, how can people reach you? Any last minute
Yeah.
advice?
The easiest way to reach me is to go to exitontop.com. That's exitontop.com. If you're interested in the M&A side of my business, that's nericap.com. That's nericap.com. All my contact information is there, so you can grab me through either of those resources. Last advice, again, determine, build, realize, understand where you are as the GPS in your trip, right? If you're going to go on a trip and say, I'm in Atlanta and I'm going to go to San Diego, I'm going to grab out my Google Maps and I'm going to put San Diego as my destination in there, and I'm going to put where I am today. That's what valuation is, where you are today. And guess what? Halfway along the trip, there might be a roadblock. So my GPS will change my journey. I might decide that I want to go to San Francisco instead along the way. It doesn't matter. But you need to know where you are to know where you're going. So I would say the best advice I can give for any business owner is just get a valuation and get it from somebody that knows what they're doing, that makes it not a number that sits in a drawer, but that it's actionable and you understand what you can do to create more value in your company.
I love it. Eric, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for doing this, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.